Hello and welcome back to the VolReport Show. I'm Ryan Sylvia with VolReport.com on the Rivals Network, and I have a special guest with us today from OUInsider, the Oklahoma affiliate on Rivals.com, Jesse Crittenden. Jesse, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. Got back a little bit ago from one of Brent Venables' best pressers in a while, and some of those best moments. We're talking about this game coming up this weekend, and it's made me even more excited than I already was for the matchup. So it's going pretty well right now, man.
Yeah, there's a bunch of storylines that are pretty easy to figure out for this matchup. First of all, let's start with it being the first SEC game in Oklahoma history. Just is that kind of give it an extra boost in terms of atmosphere on Saturday?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, for one, Brent Venables talked about it today. I mean, he said if you look at the history of the SEC, it's just incredibly difficult to win on the road. So, I mean, he basically said, I think our fans will bring energy and create that atmosphere. But, even actually one of the players, Danny Stutzman at linebacker, one of the leaders of the team, actually said that he didn't feel like the fourth quarter against Tulane last weekend was up to the standard when it comes to creating an environment. And he kind of challenged fans to really bring it this weekend. So I do think not only is there just excitement, but I do think there is a sense of pressure for the fan base to really be loud and to really be energetic. And the thing about this too is that, I mean, OU's had years to prepare for this now. I mean, they've had basically 3 years of knowing that this was going to come. And so I think there's been all kinds of buildup and preparation for it. And then you factor in that it's not just the SEC, it's the start of the SEC, but it's against a Tennessee team that's playing arguably as well as anybody in the country right now. Then you add that it's Josh Heupel's homecoming of sorts to Norman. I honestly would go as far as to say that this is one of, if not the biggest home game for OU in a decade plus. So there's a ton of excitement for it.
Let's talk about that Josh Heupel storyline. It obviously gets asked about to Brent Venables. It gets asked about to Josh Heupel. And both sides playing cordial so far, just kind of tipping the cap to each other, as I think we all expected. But outside of that, Joey Halzle, offensive coordinator for Tennessee, he was a kind of a reserve quarterback for Oklahoma for a few years. Willie Martinez, he coached at Oklahoma from 2010, 2011, was a part of a 2010 Big 12 championship. There's even more ties when you go down the list than just Josh Heupel at the top. So what's that dynamic, do you think, going to play like on Saturday? Is there going to be boos when Josh Heupel walks on the field? Is there going to be a quick kind of tip of the cap to Josh Heupel on the video? Like, how do you think this dynamic's going to play out on Saturday?
It's an interesting question because, and for one, Brent mentioned that it's not just the Josh Heupel connection, that there's connections on down that coaching staff and roster. But I think it's interesting just because, I mean, Brent and Josh are still friends. I think they still see themselves like that is still a strong relationship that has grown and continued since even when they met in 98, obviously with Venables as co-defensive coordinator at the time. That 2000 championship team was really special. And it was special for a lot of reasons. I mean, nobody saw that coming. I mean, OU had gone 7-5 the year before. It really wasn't until OU won the national championship almost that people started to believe in it, because they were underdogs all year long. Then you put in the Josh Heupel factor of it. I mean, look, he started his career at Weber State and wasn't a guy that was on many people's radars. He was decent in 1999, but I don't think anybody had thought of him as a championship caliber quarterback. And then what do you know? He breaks out, finishes as the runner-up for the Heisman Trophy that year. So all that is to say, when you add that into the fact that OU hasn't won a national championship since then, it was a big thing for Venable, or it was a big thing for Heupel. It was Venable's second year as co-defensive coordinator there. All of that has just made it even more meaningful than just a typical national championship, I think. And I think it meant a lot to the fan base as well. Now, I think some of the younger fans, particularly maybe some of the students in the student section, they may not fully understand the weight of what it means for Josh Heupel to come back. They may not fully understand or even remember that 2000 national championship. But for the older fans, I think it's going to mean a lot. So I don't think it's going to be overwhelmingly positive in terms of when he comes back on the field. But I do think people hold a really special place for Josh Heupel, and I do think that will be showed this weekend.
For Tennessee fans, I think the best way I've heard it put was this is like T. Martin coaching Oklahoma and coming to Neyland. A national champion quarterback, a similar season, 1998, the last time Tennessee won a national championship. And it's not the exact same where Tennessee right before that had Peyton Manning. So obviously they were a really good program and they were trending well with Peyton. But once Peyton left, there was a lot of question marks on maybe how good this team would be without debatably one of the best college football quarterbacks of all time being your quarterback. T. Martin comes in and Tennessee runs the table, wins a national championship. From there, doesn't necessarily have like a star-filled NFL career. So there's a lot of parallels in that sense between Josh Heupel and T. Martin. So if you're a Tennessee fan and you're kind of wondering what the dynamic is like, I think that's the best way I've heard it put. Imagine if T. Martin was coaching an Oklahoma team or a team like that and coming to Neyland Stadium. It would be weird, but when they walk out on the field, you're still definitely going to boo them because you're rooting for Tennessee and they're representing a different university. So I just thought, so I heard someone say that, and I thought that was a good way to put it. Let's talk about the game, though. First things first, we got a question in our forum. He wanted to hear kind of your perspective on Oklahoma's offensive line. There's been a lot of talk kind of about what the actual standing of that line is, the way he phrased it. What's the OU offensive line status? Is it as bad as people make it seem? So I'll just kind of hand that over to you from there.
Yeah, look, it's a good question. And honestly, it's probably the biggest question for either team on either side of the ball heading into this one. Now, the offensive line was the biggest question mark for this year. I mean, and then that started in the spring. I mean, they basically lost all starting five of their offensive linemen from a year ago. It was a position that they really targeted during, in the transfer portal, even during high school recruiting. And then when it got to fall camp, I think, I don't know if there was anybody overwhelmingly positive that it could be one of the biggest, one of the best position groups in the SEC, but I think there was some optimism. Through 3 weeks, that optimism has certainly dampened. And part of it is injuries. I mean, look, OU has basically been playing their fourth string center the last 2 weeks. Their starting left tackle or their presumed starting left tackle basically hasn't played this season. The guy that would be their backup center and possibly one of their starting guards hasn't played. He suffered an injury in the spring. So that offensive line has just been banged up. So that's part of it. And then I think also on top of it, you've just seen some issues with some cohesiveness. I mean, Jackson Arnold has been pressured a lot. I mean, he got sacked 3 times against a pretty bad Houston team. He got sacked twice against a pretty bad Temple team. And the running game just hasn't been super explosive so far, particularly with the running backs. I mean, OU averaged 2.6 yards per carry against Houston. They averaged a little over 4 yards per carry against Houston, but a lot of that was Jackson Arnold, the quarterback, taking off. The running backs just, I mean, it hasn't really been there. The starting running back, Gavin Sawchuk, is averaging just over 2 yards per carry on the year. So all of that being said, I think there's definitely some concern about the state of the offensive line heading into not only SEC play, but especially this weekend. I think there was more optimism they were going to show more progress even with the injuries than they did. And then you factor in that that Tennessee has one of, if not the best defensive lines in the entire conference and maybe the entire country, and that pass rush is legit. That is certainly a concern. I think there's a real concern about what Tennessee could do to disrupt OU's running game that's already struggled. And when you've got a true sophomore quarterback like Jackson Arnold, if you can't run the ball, that just makes things harder on him to try to produce everything for this offense. So I think there's a little bit of optimism that OU could get Branson Hickman, their starting center. I think there's optimism that he could come back this weekend. But one thing is clear, they're not going to be fully healthy. They're going to be missing a couple of key guys. And if they don't play honestly significantly better than they did the first 3 weeks of this season, if they don't play significantly better, it's going to be a long day for this OU offense. It's just going to be hard for them to get anything done. And I think now you're just wondering, can you at least get your starting center back? If you can get him back, maybe that helps, but it's going to be a tough task. And that's easily the biggest question heading into this weekend.
Now, that question was asked by PA Volfan over in the Rocky Top Forum. If you guys want your questions answered in the future, as we do, either me and Noah in our previews or with the opponent previews with other guys from the Rivals Network. Make sure you grab yourself a subscription. We're always answering questions over there. You mentioned Jackson Arnold, though. Two guys from the 23 class, Nico Imalayava and Jackson Arnold, 2 5-stars. How has Arnold looked so far? Is there optimism around? Because in the Knoxville boat, there's a lot of kind of headlines and Heisman buzz around Nico. What's the dynamic like for Jackson Arnold?
Yeah, I think it's been almost difficult to kind of evaluate Jackson Arnold through the first 3 weeks. And part of that, again, is that the offensive line hasn't been whole. There's been struggles on the offensive line. The running game hasn't been very good. And then to top that off, OU's basically been without 4 of their top 5 receivers through the first 3 weeks. One of them, Jaden Gibson, suffered a season-ending injury in fall camp. One of them, Jalil Farouk, who's a senior, a 3-year starter, broke his foot in the season opener on the first possession of the game. A couple of other guys, one guy, Nick Anderson, that had 800 yards last season, hasn't played this year. So basically, there hasn't been the full complement of weapons. And then you add that this is Seth Luttrell's first season as the play caller for this offense. You've definitely seen some struggles with some overall cohesiveness. This offense hasn't been at full strength. At the same time, it's kind of been an up and down start to the season for Jackson. There's certainly been some good moments. Really, he's excelled the most in the running game. He almost had 100 rushing yards against Tulane. His running ability was a big part of why they won that game. They scored on 3 of their 5 drives in the first half. His rushing ability was a big part of that. He had a 47-yard run at one point that set up a touchdown. He kind of clinched the game in the fourth quarter with a 24-yard scramble on a 3rd down. That was a really big play. So I think he's definitely flashed that mobility that some fans were excited about. In the same token, the passing game success just hasn't been there. He hasn't thrown for over 180 yards in a game yet. Had a pretty bad pick 6 against Tulane that kind of let them back into the game early in the fourth quarter. And really the explosive passing game just hasn't been there. I think he's 3 of 11 on passes of 20 yards or more so far this year. So not only are they not throwing the ball downfield very much, which is kind of one of the things you expected to see with Jackson in this offense, but when he has thrown the ball downfield, there just hasn't been a ton of success. So all that being said, I think there's been moments where you do see the potential with a guy that was a former 5-star. In the same token, I think you've seen the struggles of a true sophomore playing in a new offense that's dealing with injuries. And unfortunately, the mix of that is if they had another week to kind of get geared up, you'd feel maybe a little bit better, but they don't have that. They're heading into a weekend against a really good Tennessee defense where there's going to be a lot of pressure to play well. So they're expecting to get a couple of the receivers back. That's a big boost, but this is going to be a heck of a challenge for Jackson. All eyes are going to be on him. And when you compare that to how Nico has played through the first 3 weeks, there's definitely a big discrepancy there. And that's probably going to be, how each of them does as young guys in a really big environment is going to be one of the bigger things to watch.
You mentioned Jalil Farouk. A couple Tennessee fans' ears might have perked up when you said Farouk. Idris Farouk, Tennessee's 4-star freshman safety, they're cousins. So if you heard Farouk and kind of were curious if there's a relation, there is. They're cousins. And also, I thought it's kind of cool on Idris Farouk's UT Sports kind of biography, personal section, says he models himself after Jalil Farouk, the Oklahoma wide receiver. So there's plenty of connections. One that I want to touch on really quick, though, DJ Terry, a guy that's obviously a Tennessee transfer, didn't play much at Tennessee, finds his way over at Oklahoma and is kind of entered that rotation for Oklahoma on the defensive line. If you could briefly touch on what his impact has been in Norman.
Yeah, I think this year we've seen him grow into a bigger role than he had last year. Last year, he kind of came on towards the end of the year, but spent a lot of it as kind of a rotation piece. He was kind of 4th or 5th in that interior defensive line room. There were just a lot of veterans and a lot of guys that had been around that were kind of ahead of him. But OU lost 4 of their 5 interior defensive linemen last year that played at least 300 snaps or more. So there was an opportunity for him to kind of step up into a bigger role. Now he hasn't started, or he's not really the starter this year. They've leaned on Dominic Williams and Grayson Halton and Jaden Jackson, a true freshman, as kind of the guys who have started there. But Terry has stepped up and I think been a pretty solid piece for OU overall. I mean, Brent Venables actually talked about him during his press conference earlier today as a guy that just has made real steps forward this year, especially compared to last year. I think he's just been a guy that's been really effective at helping stop the run. He's just kind of a big body in there, and OU has really just needed big bodies on the interior, and that's kind of what he provides. He's not necessarily going to get to the quarterback a ton. He's not necessarily the most effective guy they have in terms of pass rush, but he's getting between 25 to 30 snaps a game. He's going to play a decent amount against Tennessee. He actually talked about this kind of being not a rivalry game, but this is kind of an interesting game for him to go up against Tennessee, obviously, as you mentioned. So that is going to be one thing to watch, because he's going to play a decent amount. And given how good Tennessee's offensive line is, I mean, Brent Venables even talked about how elite that group is. Considering how good they are, considering how good the running game has been for Tennessee through 3 weeks, OU's going to need someone like Terry to step up, and if he plays well, that bodes well for OU. If he doesn't, it's very possible OU's going to struggle.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a little bit of a pipeline from Oklahoma to Tennessee. You look back to when Jeremy Pruitt had his scandals, and there's that exodus to the portal. Guys like Brent Samaglia at kicker, Eric Gray at running back. Eric Gray now with the Giants, of course, and those are. I think that dynamic's interesting too, talking about those two guys, Samaglia and Eric Gray, where I don't think any Tennessee fans really had hard feelings towards them. Like, I think a lot of Tennessee fans see Eric Gray and what he's doing in the NFL with the Giants, and Ty Chandler, who was Eric Gray's running back partner in Tennessee, who transferred to UNC, and he's doing well with the Vikings. I think a lot of Tennessee fans kind of give him that thumbs up, like, all right, we understand the Jeremy Pruitt stuff happened and you didn't have much of a choice. But I digress. To me, this game kind of comes down to, can Oklahoma's defense hold Tennessee's offense? Because I think Tennessee's defense matches up really well against Oklahoma's offense. So to me, it's that other side of the field then. If Oklahoma's defense can limit Tennessee's offense, then they have a chance. Do you agree with that sentiment?
I do. Now, having said that, I don't think OU is going to completely shut down Tennessee's offense. I think Tennessee's offense is going to score some points. I mean, they're too explosive. They're too talented at every single position group. I don't think it's realistic to think that even if OU plays its best defensive game, that they're just going to shut out Tennessee. However, what I think they can do is a couple of things to help limit this Tennessee offense. I mean, for one, OU's rush defense has been really good to start the year. Now, obviously, this is all under the umbrella that they haven't played an offense like Tennessee yet, obviously. But they're top 25 in rush defense. That has been an area they've been really good so far this year. They're limiting opposing running backs to under 2 yards per carry. They just haven't let any of their opponents run the ball on them so far. And the other thing is OU has limited explosive plays. I think OU's opponents are averaging under 4 yards a play this season, and even obviously Tulane isn't as explosive as Tennessee, but Tulane is a decently explosive offense with some really explosive players. And I mean, Tennessee scores 19 points, only 12 of them came on offense, and OU did a really good job of keeping things ahead of them. So you're giving up under 4 yards of play. You're keeping everything in front of you. They've made opponents kind of work their way gradually up the field. That's really important against the Tennessee team that obviously can really run the ball. They've been one of the best teams at running the ball, but they've been really explosive. I mean, they're averaging over 8 yards a play. I think that's in the top 5 nationally. So I think if you're OU, you have to do a couple of things. You have to be able to limit the running game for Tennessee, and I think you somehow have to do that without giving up really big chunk plays through the air. So Tennessee's going to score. They're going to be able to move the ball a little bit. But I think if you're OU, you're banking on making Tennessee have to work on it. And then you add in the fact that OU has 10 takeaways on the year. They're tied for the lead in the entire country in takeaways. I think you're hoping you make Tennessee have to go play after play. You don't let them get the play. You don't let them get explosive plays down the field. You make them stay on the field and work their way, and maybe you find your way into some takeaways that makes things easier for the OU offense. So all that being said, I agree with you. I don't know how much success OU's offense is going to have. It's really going to come down to, can this defense limit what has been arguably the best offense in all of college football through 3 weeks?
Well, that's what OU needs to do, but what do you think is going to happen on Saturday? You don't have to give an exact score prediction, but how do you see this thing playing out in Norman?
Honestly, I do think, I think OU being a touchdown underdog to me feels about right, because I think ultimately Tennessee just has more paths to victory than Oklahoma does, that they've showed more on both sides of the ball. And while Oklahoma, not that the offense has been completely bad all year, but there's been some really struggling moments, and it's been the defense that's had to really kind of carry the weight. And the reality is this weekend, you can't expect the OU defense to do everything. I think the OU defense is going to make some plays. I think they're going to make things hard on Tennessee's offense, but you cannot expect the OU defense to win this game for you. The offense is going to have to make some plays, and that's just going to be really tough against a really good Tennessee defense, particularly because I just don't think OU is going to be fully healthy. So I do think this is going to be a close game. I think some people expect Tennessee to kind of run away with this. I would be really surprised if that happens. As good as Tennessee is, this is going to be I think a pretty hostile road environment for them. Obviously, Nico is a redshirt freshman this is his first true road game. He could pass the test with flying colors, but I think it would be easy to expect that there's going to be maybe some jitters early. He's going to have to find his way to settle in. Maybe the OU defense takes advantage of that. But overall, I just through 3 weeks, I think Tennessee has showed itself as a more complete football team on both sides of the ball. I think ultimately that's going to be what leads Tennessee to a close win, I think. Now I want to be, for any OU fans that are watching me right now, I do think OU can win this game. I think there's nobody more pessimistic right now than OU fans, given some of the struggles they've had. I do think OU can win this game. They're at home. Maybe some of the guys they get back healthy will help them, but overall, I think top to bottom, Tennessee's a little bit of a better football team, and I think Tennessee will win this in a close one.
All right, Jesse, thank you so much. That was awesome. Make sure you guys go check out OUInsider.com. Even if you're a Tennessee fan, if you are a Tennessee fan, you got the family over for the game this Saturday, and you want to be the smartest person in the living room watching, make sure you check out OUInsider.com so you know everything there is to know about the Sooners. Jesse's on Twitter at Jesse Crittenden, or the handle is on the screen right under his picture. So make sure you guys go and check them out. And then also check out VolReport.com, as we will have content all the way up and on game day. Thank you so much once again, Jesse. See you Saturday, and thank you for watching.